What if your soulmate's disappearance was actually the ultimate act of love? When Qiu, a 24-year-old bank clerk, met the enigmatic Qiu Chengyuan, he seemed perfect until he vanished after 3 dates, leaving only a car and a stuffed rabbit with their initials. 7 years later, now a wife and mother, Qi stumbles upon his obituary in a financial news alert. The man who claimed to relocate to Switzerland had actually been battling a terminal illness. As she unlocks his abandoned penthouse, walls of clandestine photos and unsigned medical documents reveal their whirlwind romance was actually his meticulously orchestrated farewell, a love letter written with borrowed time. Chapter 1. When Qiu was 24, she dated a man briefly. No one around her knew about him. His name was Qiu Chengyuan. Qiu had just started working at the bank when she met him. She wasn't one to go out much. Her social circle was small, and her family constantly worried about her finding a suitable partner, asking relatives to keep an eye out for her. Qiu Chengyuan was introduced through her aunt's side. Before meeting him, Qiu heard from the matchmaker that he was older than her, not a Qingdao native, but owned a house and a car in Qingdao, came from a decent family, and worked in the new energy sector. Qiu was unfamiliar with the new energy sector. Qiu Chengyuan wasn't her first blind date either. In fact, because of her reserved nature, the few men she'd met before either fizzled out due to lack of conversation during the initial meeting or added her on WeChat and actively chatted with her. But her poor communication skills eventually led to things fading away. She hadn't held out much hope this time either. But unexpectedly, the moment she saw the man sitting by the coffee shop window, she was drawn to his distinguished air. That day, Qiu remembered the weather wasn't great, even a little hazy. Qiu Chengyuan wore a gray suit. Despite the formal attire, the fact that he wasn't wearing a tie and his shirt collar was slightly loose gave him a relaxed feel. The first thing Qiu saw was his profile, the kind of face elders would adore: a broad forehead, thick eyebrows, large eyes, and a dignified appearance. The matchmaker had said he was 30, probably just over 30, but he didn't look old. Instead, he gave off a refined and composed impression. In terms of looks alone, he was among the more outstanding men she'd met on blind dates. While not excessively handsome, Qiu Chengyuan possessed a unique aura. Later, Qiu recalled it as the distinct elite air of a successful individual. A cup of coffee sat in front of him, 2/3 finished. Qiu didn't know how long he'd been waiting. He seemed to have arrived early. He wasn't looking at his phone. His gaze drifted out the window, his brow slightly furrowed. The way he earnestly waited made Qiu feel a surge of goodwill towards him. She walked towards him and politely asked, "Excuse me, are you Mr. Qiu Chengyuan?" The man turned. His gaze lingered on her face for 2 seconds. Then he smiled. "Miss Qi." Qiu nodded, feeling a little awkward as she sat down opposite him. To her surprise, as soon as she sat, Qiu Chengyuan asked if she was hungry. They had arranged to meet at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, an awkward time that was close to lunch. So, Qiu Chengyuan suggested they grab a bite to eat, and Qiu agreed. Qiu Chengyuan took her to a newly opened Italian restaurant nearby. Qiu had heard her colleagues mention it before. Its main branch was in Beijing, and the prices were exorbitantly high. A few colleagues had said they'd try it when there was a discount on dipping. Going to such an expensive restaurant for a first meeting made Qiu somewhat uneasy. Qiu Chengyuan seemed to sense her apprehension and started some light-hearted conversation, asking her if she liked seafood, if she surfed, and so on. Qiu had been worried that her complete lack of knowledge about new energy would hinder their conversation. However, when she asked about his work, he considerately said, "It would probably be quite dry for you, just like how bank statements are for me." Qiu laughed. Although it was just casual chit-chat, Qiu could sense Qiu Chengyuan's refinement. He had a way of speaking that made people feel comfortable. A former classmate had once told her that people with high emotional intelligence, even if their lives are vastly different from yours, won't make you feel any sense of disparity when you chat with them. It's an art, and she thought Qiu Chengyuan was a master of this art. She had been slightly regretful that her attire that day was too casual, a cotton top and a pair of work pants, hardly showing much effort. But throughout the meal, Qingdao didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, she felt it was her most comfortable blind date. After returning home that day, Qingdao remained excited. She couldn't quite put her finger on the feeling, but she found herself checking her phone more frequently than usual in the following 2 days, seemingly anticipating something. However, a week passed, and Qiu Chengyuan didn't contact her. According to the matchmaker, Qiu Chengyuan hadn't inquired about Qimo's impression of him either. Based on her past blind date experiences, he probably wasn't interested. Qimo was initially a little sad. It was rare to meet someone she clicked with, but it had led nowhere. Later, she came to terms with it. The gap between her and Qiu Chengyuan was still quite significant. Although Qimo's parents both worked in government agencies, and she herself had managed to get into a 211 university, after graduating, she started working an entry-level position in a bank. In the eyes of ordinary people, her job was stable, but for someone like Qiu Chengyuan, she was probably too ordinary. In the highly competitive dating market, Qiu Chengyuan likely belonged to the highly sought-after category, while Qimo didn't have a particularly impressive background, nor striking looks, and even her personality was mild-mannered. It was difficult for someone to be immediately captivated by her. As time went by, Qimo gradually forgot about it, treating it as just another failed case in her long list of blind dates. Only occasionally, in unguarded moments, would she recall Qiu Chengyuan's smile, like the gentle breeze on the shores of Lake Baikal, fleeting and ephemeral. What Qimo never expected was that one evening a month later, while she was applying a face mask, she received a call from an unknown number. She usually didn't answer calls from unknown numbers at this hour, but when the phone rang a second time, she instinctively pressed the answer button. A man's voice, somewhat familiar, asked, "Is this Qimo?" "Yes, who is this?" "Qiu Chengyuan. Do you remember me?" The moment she heard the name, Qimo felt her heart skip a beat. Her face mask slipped halfway down her face, and she stammered, "Hello, Mr. Qiu." Her stiff reply was met with a chuckle on the other end. The phone was pressed against her ear, and his magnetic voice seemed to slide down her ear canal, making her blush. Qiu Chengyuan apologized. "Sorry for contacting you so late. After meeting you that day, something came up at the company. Shortly after, I went to Switzerland and just returned tonight." Qimo's head was buzzing. Following his words, she asked, "Tonight?" "Yes, I just left Luting Airport. I brought you a small gift. I have to go to Shanghai early tomorrow morning, and the next time we meet might be a while away, so I wanted to give it to you now. If it's convenient, could you tell me your address?" Qimo was completely stunned. Someone she had completely removed from her list of potential partners suddenly wanted to see her, catching her off guard. She replied, "You're too kind. You must be very tired after just getting off the plane. There's no need to rush." Silence hung in the air for a few seconds, agonizing seconds that made Qimo regret her words of refusal. Just as she thought Qiu Chengyuan would hang up, his voice lowered, and he asked again, with sincerity, "Just to meet you downstairs. Is that really inconvenient?" Although it was already late, Qimo still gave Qiu Chengyuan her address. This man she had only met once. Perhaps it was because she heard he had rushed to see her straight after getting off the plane, but Qimo couldn't bear to refuse him again, nor could she deny the little flicker of anticipation in her heart. Although it was past 9 o'clock, and even though it was just a meeting downstairs, to make up for the casualness of their first meeting, Qimo changed into a silk dress. It was a blue, cinched-waist dress with large ruffled lapels, a very French cut. She hadn't worn it much. Her mother had made her buy a few presentable outfits when she graduated, but since starting at the bank, she wore her uniform every day and had no opportunity to wear it. About 40 minutes later, she received a call from Qiu Chengyuan and went downstairs. The car was parked under the streetlight outside the complex. Qimo spotted it immediately. It was hard to miss. This time, Qiu Chengyuan was in a very expensive Rolls-Royce. He got out of the back seat, and Qimo then noticed there was a driver in the front. At their previous meeting, Qiu Chengyuan had driven a BMW 5 Series. Why not a cheap car? It hadn't surprised Qiu. This time, she clearly had a new understanding of Qiu Chengyuan's background. Seeming to sense Qiu's gaze, Qiu Chengyuan walked towards her and glanced back at the car. The company arranged for someone to pick me up. Qiu didn't say anything, but she had a vague feeling that Qiu Chengyuan's family background was more than just decent, as the matchmaker had described. In fact, during their first meeting, Qiu had already sensed a kind of elegance and composure in Qiu Chengyuan, cultivated from an upbringing surrounded by good education. Perhaps because he had just gotten off the plane, he was dressed casually in a white polo shirt and beige casual pants. Standing before Qiu, she realized how tall he was, his physique exuding a sense of security. Qiu Chengyuan looked Qiu up and down, smiling. Beautiful dress. Qiu looked up at him, the light in her eyes shimmering under the streetlight. Qiu Chengyuan added, "Of course, it mostly depends on who's wearing it." This natural compliment made Qiu avert her gaze, the corners of her eyes crinkling into a smile. Qiu Chengyuan pulled out a square box from behind him and handed it to her. "Bought on the way, don't mind it." Qiu's gaze fell upon the box, and her expression instantly stiffened. It was a box from a century-old Swiss luxury watch brand. Although Qiu couldn't afford such expensive, top-tier luxury goods, she knew the contents wouldn't be cheap. She said hesitantly, "It's too expensive. I can't accept this." Qiu Chengyuan looked slightly troubled. "My mother doesn't wear these things. If you don't accept it, it'll be a bit of a problem." Qiu asked softly, then, "Can it be returned?" The pale yellow light spilled over Qiu Chengyuan's sharp features, softening his appearance. He said helplessly, "Would I have to fly back to Switzerland? I'm afraid I don't have the time. I thought you'd like it. I spent a long time choosing it." A hint of disappointment laced his words, making Qiu feel guilty, as if she was rejecting a gift someone had meticulously chosen for her and flown across the world to deliver. Qiu Chengyuan seemed to see her dilemma. He took her wrist, placing the box in her palm. "Don't feel burdened. There's plenty of time." Chapter 2. Since receiving Qiu Chengyuan's gift, Qiu had been uneasy, often wondering about the meaning behind Qiu Chengyuan's gift. Was it an implication that he wanted to date her? Otherwise, why would he give such a valuable gift on their second meeting? But if he really wanted to date her, Qiu Chengyuan hadn't actively sent her messages afterward, unlike the men she had met on blind dates. Qiu Chengyuan didn't seem to be in a hurry to define their relationship. Qiu thought he must be busy with work, so she was embarrassed to disturb him. She received another call from Qiu Chengyuan more than half a month later. He said he was back from Shanghai and wanted to invite Qiu for a meal, asking if she would do him the honor. Although Qiu hesitated for a moment, her heart had been restless since the moment she received the call. This was the first time Qiu Chengyuan picked her up from her workplace. This time, he drove a gray Lexus and dressed more casually, but Qiu could still tell that his clothes were made of high-end fabrics. He opened the car door for her, and when he got into the driver's seat, he took out a bouquet of flowers from the back seat. The scene was somewhat like an idol drama, and Qiu was momentarily stunned. It was her first time receiving flowers, such a large bouquet, but they weren't roses, they were lilies. She didn't know what expression she had, probably looking quite unsophisticated. She softly said, "Thank you." On the way to the restaurant, the car was filled with the faint fragrance of lilies. She felt a subtle atmosphere between herself and Qiu Chengyuan, which made her cheeks warm all the way. Perhaps Qiu Chengyuan sensed Qiu's nervousness and deliberately asked her, "Would you like to listen to some music?" "Sure," Qiu replied. But at the red light, Qiu Chengyuan fumbled for a while before turning on the music, an English song, "The Lark in the Clear Air." As they drove through the bustling rush-hour streets, the car was filled with heavenly music, and Qiu felt as if the whole world was isolated outside the car. The wonderful atmosphere made her lips curl into a smile. "The voice is so clean. Do you usually listen to this kind of music?" Qiu asked. Qiu Chengyuan held the steering wheel with one hand. "Frankly, I'm not very familiar with this car." Qiu looked at him in surprise. He smiled and said, "The car is borrowed." I was worried that driving a too eye-catching car to pick you up would cause you trouble. Qiu was even more surprised. Then the first time we met, also borrowed, Qiu Chengyuan confessed. And at the airport, this time, Qiu Chengyuan glanced at her with a smile in his eyes. That car is my own, but you said it was the company's. Another red light. Qiu Chengyuan stopped the car and turned to look at her sincerely. I was afraid you would have concerns. For vain girls, it might be a good thing, but for you, it might scare you away. But how did you know I wasn't a vain girl? Qiu Chengyuan looked ahead, hinting, when we first met, you insisted on not letting me pay for the meal alone and wanted to give me the money. But maybe I was just being polite. Qiu Chengyuan laughed, his gaze softening as he turned to her. When you received the gift, you didn't look happy, but rather worried like. He seemed to think for a moment, then continued, like a frightened Angora rabbit. What kind of rabbit is that? Qiu asked. Qiu Chengyuan just smiled and didn't speak. The light of the setting sun fell on his profile, as if it had been filtered. His elegant and calm movements as he turned the steering wheel were so handsome that Qiu was slightly stunned. It was still a very thoughtful date. Excluding the time he picked her up from the airport, Qiu had only been out with Qiu Chengyuan once, but he remembered that she liked sweets, didn't drink iced water, and needed soy sauce with seafood. Qiu had a strict upbringing. Before college, her family didn't allow her to be too close to male classmates. She had never had a boyfriend. In her limited social circle, no man had ever put in as much effort for her as Qiu Chengyuan. It seemed that he could arrange dates that perfectly suited her taste without any effort. For example, after dinner, he took her to her favorite anime convention. The tickets were hard to get, and Qiu didn't know how he managed to get them. Once inside, she talked nonstop, introducing the characters to Qiu Chengyuan. She thought that with his age and work environment, he might not be interested, but he listened very carefully and occasionally asked her about the characters' backstories. Qiu was also very enthusiastic about telling him the plot. Qiu felt that Qiu Chengyuan wasn't just being perfunctory. He was genuinely trying to understand her preferences. He even bought her several hair accessories. She posed and he took photos. On the way back, Qiu asked him, Mr. Qiu, can I ask you a question? If you can call me Qingyuan, I'd be more willing to answer your questions. Okay, Qingyuan, I only heard from the matchmaker that your family is quite well off, but are you very rich? Like a member of a wealthy family, a second-generation rich person? Can you tell me? I need to be mentally prepared. Qiu Chengyuan said meaningfully, if I am, would I still have a chance to ask you out next time? Qiu's expression became serious. Her not-so-large eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was seriously considering the question. Then she answered him, if that's the case, I'm afraid I'd have to ask my family's opinion. I'm just very ordinary. Qiu Chengyuan laughed. I'm kidding. I'm just an ordinary person, a little above middle class, not a member of a wealthy family. Qiu secretly looked at him. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Don't believe me? Do you need to meet my family to confirm? Qiu quickly looked away. No need. Then she said, since you borrowed a car in the first place, why tell me? As I said, I borrowed the car because it didn't want to be too high profile and make you feel uncomfortable. There's no need to hide anything from you. Why not? I mean, some men with money might want to test if a woman is greedy for their money. Qiu Chengyuan replied calmly, I have eyes. Those four ambiguous words told Qiu that he didn't need to use such methods to get to know a woman. When they arrived at Qiu's neighborhood, Qiu Chengyuan got out of the car to walk her to her door. The evening breeze ruffled Qiu's hair, and she couldn't fix it because she was holding the flowers. He reached out and tucked her messy hair behind her ear. The unintentional touch of his thumb brushing against her earlobe made Qiu's cheeks flush. The moonlight was hazy and ambiguous, and she lowered her head, her heart racing. He said to her, go home and rest early. Good night. She softly said good night. She didn't dare look back as she turned around, but she could feel her steps were really like a light-footed rabbit. When she got home, her mother saw her holding a bouquet of flowers and asked what was going on. She told her family truthfully about the person her aunt had introduced and said that they weren't officially dating, they were still just friends. She thought Qiu Chengyuan probably thought the same way, which was why he said, "The future is long." Their next meeting was a month later, even longer than the last time. So when he suddenly appeared at the bank entrance, Qimo said a little sulkily, "I thought you'd forgotten about me." Qiu Chengyuan was wearing sportswear today, a rare sight, and looked very clean and refreshing. He smiled at her and apologized. "I got it. I'll try to report my itinerary to you next time." Qimo looked at the white Mercedes CLS behind him, surprised. "Did you borrow a car again?" He replied, "This time I didn't. This car is what I just bought. What do you think?" Qimo walked around his new car and nodded. "Not bad. Nice exterior, not too high profile. Do you have a driver's license?" he asked. Qimo nodded. "Yes, but I'm still a road hazard. I haven't driven much." "Try it later." Qimo waved her hands repeatedly, and Qiu Chengyuan said, "I just drove back from Yintai. Let me rest for a while. I'll sit next to you and watch. I won't give you a chance to kill anyone. Then wait for me. I'll clock out." As she turned to leave, she heard Qiu Chengyuan say behind her, "You look very energetic in your work clothes." Qimo's lips curved into a smile. Under Qiu Chengyuan's guidance, Qimo basically got familiar with the CLS. Although her driving skills weren't great, she could barely drive on the road. Perhaps it was because of Qimo's casual remark that day. "I thought you'd forgotten about me." That even though they didn't see each other often in the following period, Qiu Chengyuan would occasionally call her to chat or tell her where he was going on a business trip. In a way, their way of getting along was somewhat like a couple, but neither of them made it clear. Qimo had never been in a relationship before, and she felt that the man should be the first to speak. Perhaps the timing wasn't right for them yet, so she wasn't in a hurry. In the following days, they met 3 more times. Every time she met Qiu Chengyuan, Qimo looked forward to it. Her feelings for Qiu Chengyuan grew stronger and stronger, even to the point of liking him. She would look forward to his calls, look forward to their next meeting after each parting, and hope that their relationship could take a step further each time they met. Qimo couldn't quite describe the feeling. For example, when she asked Qiu Chengyuan about something, he never hid anything from her or seemed reluctant to speak, but she still felt that he was like a person covered in a veil, a little unclear. She couldn't quite grasp this feeling either. For example, even though the atmosphere was sometimes very good and they were very close, Qiu Chengyuan never touched her, not even a touch on her shoulder. He always kept just the right distance, making Qimo's heart feel like a fish on a hook, neither up nor down. Qimo's personality had always been gentle and slow. Without sufficient hints from Qiu Chengyuan, she didn't dare take that step towards him. So for a long time, she lived in a state of anxiety, always wondering whether Qiu Chengyuan regarded her as a potential partner or just a friend. In addition, her father had a conversation with her, hinting at the importance of matching social status. He could see his daughter's recent troubles. Hearing that her relationship with the man she met on the blind date hadn't been settled for several months, Qi's father worried that his daughter would become a plaything for a rich man, so he reminded her to be careful. During that most tangled and difficult period, Qimo forced herself to view her relationship with Qiu Chengyuan with a normal heart. A relationship between a man and a woman didn't necessarily have to lead to being together. If Qiu Chengyuan really didn't have those feelings for her, maybe being friends like this would be quite easy. After thinking it through, Qimo thought she would feel more relaxed, but in reality, her emotions often fell into a more painful state. About 4 months into their acquaintance, Qiu Chengyuan contacted Qimo and told her that he was going on a business trip for a while and needed to have his car serviced. Could he trouble Qimo to help? Qimo agreed, but after hanging up the phone, she remembered that Qiu Chengyuan had a driver at home. But then she thought that maybe the driver was going on the business trip with him, so she didn't think too much about it. Qimo had driven the white CLS a few times and was quite familiar with it. So after Qimo helped him get the car serviced at the 4S shop, the car remained at her place. She thought Qiu Chengyuan would come to pick up the car after his business trip, but she didn't expect that Qiu Chengyuan disappeared for a while after that. She tried to contact him, but couldn't reach him. About a month later, she received another call from Qiu Chengyuan. Chapter 3. On the phone, Qiu Chengyuan's voice seemed a little strange. He told Qimo that he wanted to see her. Qimo didn't have time to wonder why he hadn't contacted her for over a month. Her only concern was whether something had happened to Qiu Chengyuan. They agreed to meet at Huiquan Bay. Qimo drove the CLS there, thinking that Qiu Chengyuan might need the car when he returned. When Qimo saw Qiu Chengyuan again, she felt that she had worried unnecessarily. He didn't look like he had any problems at all. He was wearing a dark checkered mid-length trench coat. His hair was neat and energetic, and he was still as tidy as ever. When Qimo's figure appeared in his sight, he gave her a familiar smile. Qimo's heart was in turmoil. She had many questions, but when she saw his smile, she couldn't help but smile too. It was as if her facial muscles were out of her control, and the joy in her heart couldn't be hidden. The closer she got to him, the hotter her palms became. She walked up to him and asked, "How long have you been waiting?" He said, "Not long." But Qimo saw that the coffee in his hand was empty. The coffee shop was just across the street. He had been there for at least half an hour. Qiu Chengyuan noticed Qimo's gaze, turned around, threw the coffee cup into the trash can, and said to her, "Want to take a walk?" "Sure." So they strolled along the seaside beach. She didn't have time to ask him, but he told Qimo directly, "I ran into some trouble." "At the company?" He said, kind of. "Is it serious?" "It's quite serious. I'll probably have to devote a lot of energy to it for a long time." Qimo was silent. She didn't know what to say or what Qiu Chengyuan wanted to tell her by saying this. It was already late autumn, and the sea breeze was a bit strong. The streetlights were on. Qimo looked down at the shadows at her feet. Gradually, she deliberately fell half a step behind, walking in his shadow, as if being enveloped by him would make her feel warmer, until Qiu Chengyuan suddenly stopped. She looked up at him, and he asked her, "Are you cold?" Before she could answer, he had already taken off his trench coat and draped it over her shoulders. She felt her body surrounded by his warmth. His coat had a faint scent, not very obvious, but seemed familiar. The last ray of light in the sky gradually disappeared from the sea horizon. Qimo's gaze followed that light through Qiu Chengyuan. Qiu Chengyuan also turned his gaze. There were still some tourists on the seaside beach, but many fewer than in summer. He asked her, "Do you like those? Those water activities?" I rarely play them. I haven't tried anything too exciting." Qiu Chengyuan replied, "Neither have I." Qimo turned to look at him. The earth had fallen into darkness, but his outline was clearer. Qimo couldn't help but be curious. "I thought you played before. When did you come to Qingdao? I heard you weren't born here." Qiu Chengyuan nodded. "Kunshan. I was born in Kunshan. My family moved to Shanghai in my second year, and I didn't come here to work until after college." After a pause, Qiu Chengyuan continued, "I've been very busy since I came to Qingdao. I passed by here several times and itched to try surfing." He smiled and turned his head. "If we have a chance next time." But halfway through his sentence, he suddenly stopped smiling and didn't continue. Instead, he brought up another topic. "Didn't we pass by an escape room last time? You said you hadn't played it. I searched for nearby escape rooms while waiting for you. There's a place not far from here. Are you interested?" "Now," Qimo asked. "Time is precious. Why wait for the future when we can do it now?" "That makes sense." So they walked to the escape room, which wasn't too far away. After buying tickets, Qiu Chengyuan let Qimo choose the theme. Qimo thought that since they were playing, they might as well play something exciting. So she chose a horror theme. The rules of the game were simple. There were 4 scenes in sequence, and the exit was hidden in one of the 4 scenes. The clues for the password to open the door also needed to be found by themselves. But the difficulty was that there was a real person playing a zombie in this theme. This zombie would randomly wander through the 4 scenes, so players needed to find clues while hiding, avoiding being caught by the zombie, otherwise the game would end early. Qimo started to get nervous as soon as they entered the first scene. The dim light, the bloody ground, and the creepy props brought a strong sense of pressure. Qiu Chengyuan was very bold and directly picked up the fake arms and kidneys to search. Qiu followed him step by step. Qiu Chengyuan turned around and whispered in her ear, "I'll find the clues. You keep watch." Qiu nodded. In the first scene, they found some fragmented information. When they were about to enter the second scene, Qiu whispered to Qiu Chengyuan, "Which scene do you think the zombie will be in?" Qiu Chengyuan guessed, "We just started playing. It shouldn't come to catch us yet, or the players would ask for a refund. It should be in the third or last one." Qiu thought the same thing. After they finished searching for clues in the second scene, there were 2 passages leading to the third and fourth scenes, respectively. Qiu Chengyuan suggested, "Why don't we split up? At least one of us can escape." Qiu subconsciously grabbed his sleeve and shook her head vigorously. "Let's die together." Qiu Chengyuan looked down at her hand, holding his, and smiled. He leaned over and asked her, "Do you want to die with me that much?" Qiu was grateful that the dim light hid her flushed cheeks. Qiu Chengyuan let her hold him and said to her, 3 or 4. You choose." Qiu thought for a moment and pointed directly to scene 4. "This one." "Okay." Qiu Chengyuan strode ahead, and Qiu followed him cautiously. Just as they were about to step into scene 4, a rustling sound suddenly came from behind them. Qiu Chengyuan whipped around and suddenly put his arm across Qiu's back, pulling her forward as they ran. Qiu didn't have time to look back at all, and she stumbled into Qiu Chengyuan's arms, following him as they rushed forward. As soon as they entered scene 4, Qiu Chengyuan didn't stop for a moment. He led her straight back to the curtain behind the human flesh in the first scene. The surrounding light went out instantly, and Qiu's heart jumped into her throat. She looked up in terror and whispered, "What did you see?" Qiu Chengyuan, also slightly out of breath, said, "You're better off not knowing." His hot breath fell on her raised face, and when he saw her eyes widen twice their size from shock, he couldn't help but chuckle. Qiu frowned and glared at him. "What was it? Did you see the zombie?" Just then, Qiu Chengyuan shushed her. Qiu immediately fell silent, her body stiff as she listened to the sounds outside. There seemed to be some sounds, but also none. She couldn't hear clearly, and her nerves were tense. It was only then that she realized that Qiu Chengyuan's arm was still across her back, and his posture was also still. The corner space was very small. He probably didn't move because he was afraid that the curtain would move and alert the people outside. Qiu thought, but this posture, this distance, tormented her nerves more than the fear of being discovered by the zombie. She was almost leaning against him. To avoid falling completely on him, she held her neck stiff and her waist rigid in a very tiring posture. But the man's breath, his lowered gaze, and the touch of his hand on her back seemed to be roasting her on a grill. She didn't know how long it had been, maybe only a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. Time stood still at that moment. She only heard Qiu Chengyuan ask her in a breathy voice, "Aren't you tired of standing like this?" She gave a small sound. The next second, the hand on her back gently pushed her, and she fell completely into his chest. Her ear was pressed against his chest, clearly hearing the beating of a man's heart, strong and full of life, as if it was quickening for her. She felt Qiu Chengyuan tighten his arms, and they hugged each other completely in a very strange way. In her 24 years of life, Qiu felt for the first time that she was surrounded by a sense of security. Even in such a tense environment, even though she had been on edge a moment ago, she was completely immersed in an unprecedented throbbing. Her body was light, her soul was about to float away, her heart beat constantly against her eardrums, and some soft place in her heart kept collapsing. There were no words, just silence, closeness, and immersion in each other's breath. After a long time, Qiu Chengyuan released her and said, "It should be gone. Let's go out." He took the lead in pulling back the curtain, and Qiu followed him out in a daze. She thought she shouldn't dare to look at him. In fact, she had a hard time getting into the game for the rest of the time. Every time he looked at her, she couldn't help but smile and avoid his gaze. Their progress wasn't smooth, and they kept playing hide-and-seek with a real-life zombie. 45 minutes had passed. Qi quietly asked Qiu Chengyuan, "Should we just give up and leave?" Qiu Chengyuan knocked her head seriously. "I won't let you die with me." Later, Qiu Chengyuan started to get serious. He spread out the clues and gave the calculation part to Qi, which was her strong point. He did the rest of the reasoning, and they quickly found the clues and successfully cleared the level, just in time. It was a thrilling escape room experience. This was probably the most exciting game Qi had ever played, and not just because of the game itself. On the way back, Qi kept waiting. She thought Qiu Chengyuan should say something to her. She even felt that Qiu Chengyuan's impulse behind the curtain wasn't just because of the zombie outside. She felt that he had feelings for her too. She had a hunch that their relationship would have a clear result tonight, and she was secretly looking forward to it. Qiu Chengyuan didn't drive today. He drove the white CLS to drop Qi off at her apartment complex. Qi said to him, "You don't have to park inside. Just drop me off outside, and you can drive the car away." But Qiu Chengyuan said, "It's okay. I want to talk to you for a while." Qi gave an and sat quietly in the passenger seat, waiting shyly for him to make things clear. She even started to sweat nervously again. But things went in a completely different direction. Qiu Chengyuan was silent for nearly half a minute before opening the car window and looking at the starry sky above. He said to her, "I'm going to Switzerland in a few days. This time it's a permanent stay. It's estimated that I'll be there for at least 5 years, maybe." He paused for a few seconds. "Maybe I'll stay there forever." Qi eyelashes trembled slightly, and her fingers curled up involuntarily, waiting for his next words. After a long time, he said, "So maybe this is the last time we'll see each other." Qi suddenly felt exhausted, like someone who had struggled for a long time in the water and was ruthlessly thrown onto the beach, cruelly exposed to the sun. She felt a tingling in her nose. She thought a hug just now. She thought it was a step towards each other, but now she knew that Qiu Chengyuan was saying goodbye to her. She knew that crying was not a wise choice at this time. They were not boyfriend and girlfriend. If he had a better future, she shouldn't be sentimental. It wasn't appropriate in any way. But she had a hard time making a sound. She felt that if she made a sound at this moment, she would definitely give herself away. In a long silence, she didn't say a word. Qiu Chengyuan didn't expose her embarrassment, but gave her enough time to digest this sudden news. Until she slowly opened her mouth. "I heard it's very cold there in winter. Then, you have to keep warm after you go. I should give you something to see you off. You should have told me sooner." Qiu Chengyuan didn't look at her, his eyes always looking out the window. He said to her, "You've already seen me off in the escape room. Thank you." After he said this, he turned his head and talked about something else. "By the way, after I leave, this car will be idle. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you with something." "What is it? Can you keep the car at your place? Can you take it for maintenance for me regularly? I'll transfer the money to you later. If it's convenient, can you drive it for me sometimes? Otherwise, the car will easily have problems if it's left for too long without being driven. It needs to be driven often." Qi was a little surprised. "Aren't you afraid I'll crash your car?" Qiu Chengyuan smiled warmly. "If you crash it, there's insurance. Just drive it. Just don't crash yourself. What about your family? You should still have a driver, right?" Qiu Chengyuan said helplessly, "My family probably won't care about these things. It's not convenient to trouble other people. If you're not coming back for a long time, why don't you consider selling it?" Qiu Chengyuan answered her very seriously. "I don't want to sell a new car. I still have some feelings for it." After saying that, he looked at her deeply. "If you're willing to help me with this, you'll solve a big problem for me." Qi looked back at his deep eyes and couldn't refuse. That day, he left on foot. He said he would watch her go in first. But in fact, Qiu Chengyuan didn't know that Qi pretended to enter the building and then secretly ran out again. Facing the moonlight, she watched his back get farther and farther away, like a tall green bamboo, like a vigorous pine, like the last red leaf in late autumn falling into Qi heart, lingering. Chapter 4. A week after that parting, Qi received something, a beautifully wrapped bouquet of lilies, and a small cage containing a silly-looking rabbit. Its fluffy fur covered its squinting little eyes, and its two long ears hung down. Later, Qiu learned that this comical-looking creature was called an Angora rabbit. Although there was no farewell, she knew that Qiu Chengyuan had left, gone to that country that seemed so distant to her. For a long time afterward, Qiu would always think that if she had been more careful, she might have realized that Qiu Chengyuan had perhaps been hesitant from the beginning. For example, the flowers he gave her were always lilies, not roses, symbolizing love. And he always kept a proper distance from her, to avoid making her future situation awkward. But she had been caught up in another kind of expectation, never thinking it would end this way. She began to take care of the Angora rabbit seriously, and often held the rabbit in front of the mirror to compare her appearance with the Angora rabbit. To be honest, her frowning face really did look a bit like this dorky rabbit, with her not-so-big eyes, somewhat fleshy round face, and fluffy hair, which looked a bit silly from some angles. Yes, she always thought like this during those days, wondering if she was a bit silly. If she had been braver, more confident, taken a step forward, and told Qiu Chengyuan her feelings, would their ending have been different? Perhaps they could have found a way to balance things. She knew it would be difficult, one in Switzerland, one in China, but as long as their hearts were in the same place, no matter how great the distance, there would always be a path to each other, right? But she retreated at that one opportunity. After hearing that he might settle in Switzerland, she carefully hid her feelings. She couldn't forget the sight of his departing back that night. Many midnights, she dreamed of rushing out of the building to chase after him, telling Qiu Chengyuan that she couldn't bear him to leave and was willing to take a risk for the possibility between them. But when she woke up, all of that was just a regret left by her past timidity. The world was so big, and she had finally met the right person after 24 years. She didn't know how many more years it would take to meet the next one, and she didn't know if this missed opportunity would last a lifetime. Sometimes, she pessimistically thought that she might never meet a man who moved her heart like this again. She agreed to help Qiu Chengyuan take care of the car, partly out of selfishness. It was like keeping an invisible connection, thinking that if Qiu Chengyuan returned to China one day, and the car was with her, they would have a chance to meet again. This insignificant connection supported Qiu's longing for him. The white Mercedes occasionally became her commuting tool. Qiu Chengyuan told her to drive it often. She rarely went out on weekends, and only used the car for commuting, which inadvertently shielded her from heavy rain and severe cold. She had also tried to contact Qiu Chengyuan a month after he left, asking how he was doing in Switzerland and if he had adjusted. To her disappointment, his number was out of service, and a cold female voice always answered the phone. She knew that he had gone to Switzerland to develop his career, and perhaps had stopped using his domestic number. This was probably normal, but she was still frustrated that he hadn't left her a new way to contact him, as if she had been completely removed from his world. And just like that, they lost contact. In those 6 months, Qiu often lived in regret, and often asked herself if she would have the courage to chase after him if time went back to that night. She didn't know, but as the days of Qiu Chengyuan's departure grew longer, the longing and regret didn't fade away. Instead, they gradually became her inner demon, making her feel that the happiness that was originally within reach had slipped away because of her cowardice. She thought she had fallen in love with this man. She didn't know when, she didn't know under what circumstances, even when she didn't know what love was, she had developed this feeling for him, which often left her in a state of confusion, unable to find an exit. But at the same time, she was very clear that she shouldn't be trapped in place for a relationship that hadn't even started. So she began to interact with the outside world more frequently. For example, team building with colleagues, dinners with old classmates, and various occasions that might allow her to forget that regret. But she never expected that she would unexpectedly see the man she missed so much at a cocktail party 6 months later. Qiu's cousin worked at the headquarters of a large domestic electrical appliance company. That day was their internal celebration banquet. Because they would invite many top technical talents and partners, the cocktail party was very high-end. So her cousin gave Qiu an invitation asking her to come and have fun. It was at that occasion that Qi unexpectedly saw Qiu Chengyuan's figure. He was wearing a black suit, a low-key checkered tie, a clean and gentlemanly handkerchief corner on his left chest. His tall, elegant, and unattainable figure made Qi feel unfamiliar. Her cousin told her that General Qiu was the vice president of Jinshin Group, who had absolute executive power over this large domestic new energy company. Many of their patents and core technologies were leading the country, and they were also one of her cousin's company's largest partners. Qi knew that what her cousin said was true. New energy company? She had always thought that Qiu Chengyuan was just a middle-level manager or a director. After all, he wasn't very old, and he himself had said that he wasn't from a wealthy family, just an ordinary person. But when his identity and background were presented to her so nakedly, Qi suddenly felt that the bits and pieces of her past interactions with him became ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that he was sitting next to a woman, a beautiful woman who could be described as flawless from head to toe. In that moment, Qi felt like she couldn't breathe. The surrounding lights, the clinking glasses, and the endless laughter became particularly dazzling, suffocating her. She quickly put down her wine glass and pushed open the door to the terrace in her high heels. She couldn't stay in that place any longer. She had never thought that Qiu Chengyuan would reappear in front of her in this way. She couldn't face him sitting so perfectly with another woman. She felt particularly ridiculous, like that ridiculous Angora rabbit. Looking out from the terrace, she could still see the sea horizon at night. The sea breeze blew her fluffy long hair into a mess, and the thin black dress fluttered wildly. All she could hear was the whistling wind. She didn't even notice when the glass door of the terrace was pushed open again. A suit jacket fell on her shoulders, and the familiar warmth enveloped her exposed shoulders. When she turned around, her eyes met his deep eyes. His lips moved. "Aren't you cold?" Those three short words brought a familiar feeling rushing towards her. For a moment, Qi even felt like they were the same as before, as if time hadn't passed. Perhaps a sense of defensiveness arose in her heart. She subconsciously took a step back and coldly said, "Hello, General Qiu." Qiu Chengyuan's eyes were stained with thick ink by the pitch-black night, trapped inside, unable to melt away. He smiled faintly. "The wind is strong at night. Be careful not to catch a cold." Then he turned to walk into the venue. Qimo's heart was filled with warmth. She asked his back stubbornly, "Don't you want the car anymore?" He didn't turn around, just said, "Keep it." After his figure disappeared behind the glass door, Qimo felt a sense of powerlessness, and even felt that she was extremely ridiculous. She always thought that the nearly 700,000 or 800,000 yuan Mercedes would bring him back to her one day. But she never thought that something so valuable in her eyes might be worthless in Qiu Chengyuan's eyes, and could be discarded at any time, just like her. Her cousin hurriedly came to find Qi, asking where the suit jacket came from. Qi didn't say a word, her face tense. She asked her cousin, "Has that General Qiu been in China?" Her cousin said, "How would I know? I'm not familiar with him. He just came for a short while and left." Qi was stunned. "Left?" "Yes, he left." "What's wrong?" The sea breeze rose. The night shadows moved like shuttles, and many complex emotions gathered in Qimo's chest at the same time. Her breathing rose and fell, and she had a strong premonition that this missed opportunity might really be their last meeting. She had thought countless times, if time went back to the night of their parting, what would she do? She couldn't find an answer, but heaven had given her another chance. This time, she rushed out without hesitation. Chapter 5. The weather wasn't great tonight. Large swaths of dark clouds came from an unknown distance, obscuring the starlight and moonlight. When Qi chased out of the hotel, she happened to see the driver close the rear door of a luxury car. Although it was just a quick glance, Qi vaguely saw the man's dark blue shirt cuffs in the back seat. Instinctively, she felt that Qiu Chengyuan was in that car. She ignored her uncomfortable high heels and chased after him. But in that short distance, the driver had already returned to the driver's seat and started the car. Qingdao quickened her pace, unconsciously breaking into a jog. She didn't know what she was afraid of. A feeling of uncontrollable dread suddenly grew in her heart. But the luxury car must have had good soundproofing, and the windows were closed. Even though she shouted Qiu Chengyuan, the wheels didn't hesitate, and it drove away before her eyes. The doorman and security guards behind her stared at Qingdao in confusion. The night wind ruffled her skirt, and she stopped slowly, her spirit lost. But then the car suddenly slowed down and stopped without warning just before it was about to leave. Qingdao's eyes reignited with hope, and she lifted her skirt and ran towards it without hesitation. In her later memories, it seemed that she had never rushed towards anything or anyone so desperately in her life except for that night. Whether the haziness of the night obscured reality or the speed of her heartbeat encouraged her, none of that mattered. She only knew that when she ran to the car, the rear window had just rolled down. She bent over, panting for breath. When Qiu Chengyuan turned his head, the clouds cracked, and the moonlight reflected in his pupils, deep and intense, with a hint of surprise. What's wrong? Whether it was because his hair was shorter or because of the light, Qingdao felt that he had lost weight, and his entire outline was more distinct, striking her eyes and heart. Qingdao had a lot to say, a lot of questions to ask, a lot of things to confirm, but when she saw the woman sitting next to Qiu Chengyuan, all the impulse disappeared, and her cowardly and retreating psychology resurfaced. She paused for a long time before hurriedly taking off her coat and handing it to him through the car window. "Your clothes." Qiu Chengyuan took the suit jacket and placed it on his lap unhurriedly. He turned his head to look at her again, but didn't speak, his gaze lingering on her face, as if trying to discern something. There was more than just him in the car. They couldn't keep this stalemate. Qiu Chengyuan lowered his eyes, glanced at Qingdao's hand tightly gripping the window, raised his eyes, and asked in a gentle tone, "Is there anything else?" The wind picked up outside the car, and Qingdao shivered from the cold, but even more from the tension and unease in her heart. She glanced cautiously at the woman next to Qiu Chengyuan, who was also looking at her, and finally let go of her hand and asked, "Your girlfriend?" She didn't know what expression she had when she asked this question. She tried her best to appear natural, like a broad-minded old friend, but she didn't realize how awkward her forced smile was. After she asked this question, Qiu Chengyuan and the woman next to him laughed at the same time. Qingdao didn't know what they were laughing at. She only saw Qiu Chengyuan glance at the woman, and the noble and charming woman smiled and opened the car door, saying to Qiu Chengyuan, "I'll walk." Then she got out of the car and walked away. Qingdao stood by the car door, dumbfounded, watching the woman's departing back, not knowing what was going on. After the woman left, Qiu Chengyuan looked at Qingdao again and said, "Get in the car. I'll take you back." With no one beside Qiu Chengyuan and a car door between them, Qingdao finally shed the deliberately created politeness. All the annoyance and torment she had suffered in the past 6 months welled up in her heart. For some reason, her voice suddenly became uncontrollably choked up. "I'm not going back." Qiu Chengyuan looked at her silently and asked, "Not going home tonight?" "No." He raised his chin slightly. "Do you need me to take you to the West End in front for a room?" Qingdao turned her head to the other side, her tone not very good. "No need." Qiu Chengyuan smiled and leaned out. "Planning to spend the night on the street?" Qingdao didn't speak, her lips pressed tightly. Qiu Chengyuan raised his eyes slightly, his voice melting into the wind. "Then I'll go." Qingdao suddenly turned her head and subconsciously raised her hand to grab the car window. When Qiu Chengyuan saw her action, the smile on his lips widened. He opened the car door and said to her, "Get in first. It's windy outside." Qingdao glanced at him and got in. The driver drove the car onto the main road. Qingdao and Qiu Chengyuan were separated by a distance. She had been silent since getting into the car, and Qiu Chengyuan didn't take the initiative to start a conversation. The atmosphere in the car was a bit oppressive. She didn't know where the car was going and didn't want to ask. But there was one question that she had to consider. She turned her head and opened her mouth. Did I say something wrong just now? Why did the woman next to you leave? Qiu Chengyuan also turned his head to look back at her and suddenly asked, Don't you think we look alike? Then he chuckled. She's my sister twin. Qi Mo's eyes widened slightly in surprise, and she heard Qiu Chengyuan say casually, It's okay. I'll arrange another car to take her back. Qi Mo gradually lowered her head. The ups and downs of this night seemed to happen in an instant, and her mood gradually floated up from the abyss, uneasy and jumpy. The car circled around the city, seemingly deliberately wasting time. After a long time, Qiu Chengyuan asked again, Really not going back? Qi Mo nodded. Did you have a fight with your family? Qi Mo lowered her eyes and didn't speak. She seemed to hear Qiu Chengyuan sigh and say to the driver, Go to the Renaissance. This was the first time Qiu Chengyuan had taken Qi Mo to his place. Before this, she had rarely come to the Fushan Bay area, but she had seen the luxurious sailboat-shaped apartment from afar, which faced the 8 great passes to the west and leaned against Taiping Mountain to the north. And Qiu Chengyuan lived in a sky villa here. The house was basically in cool tones, very clean. Someone should come to clean it regularly, because Qi Mo didn't see an ad. The open kitchen design had little sign of cooking, making her suspect that Qiu Chengyuan didn't live here often. But she could still see some traces of his life. After entering the house, Qiu Chengyuan told her to make herself at home, and then he went into the bedroom, which was the innermost room. Qi Mo was too embarrassed to follow him, so she wandered around the living room and kitchen. When Qiu Chengyuan came out again, he was holding a neatly folded silk robe and handed it to Qi Mo, saying, I've cleaned out a room. There's a bathroom in the room, and I've put new towels and things in there for you. Use them as you like. Tell me if you need anything else. Qi Mo took the robe and said to him in a muffled voice, Thank you. Qiu Chengyuan pointed to the room, and Qi Mo walked in. Qiu Chengyuan suddenly called her from behind. She turned her head, and he stared at her for a few seconds. It seemed that he had something to say, but he said, Go to sleep early. Qi Mo nodded, turned her gaze, and walked into the room. After the door closed, her body leaned against the door, and her breathing rose and fell. She put the robe on the clean, beige sheets and went to the balcony to call home, saying that she wouldn't be back tonight and was staying at her cousin's house. After hanging up the phone, all the cells in her body suddenly jumped, and a rebellious excitement surged in her body. After taking a shower, Qi Mo turned off the lights and lay on the bed. It was already midnight, but she was wide awake. In fact, she was very excited. She didn't know how she had followed Qiu Chengyuan here as if possessed. But when she thought of the man she had been longing for so long outside the door, the man who had made her miss him and regret so much in the past 6 months, she couldn't calm down for a long time. She even felt that she couldn't just go to sleep like this. If impulse was a devil, what was wrong with being a devil once? She sat up from the bed, put on the big men's slippers, and opened the door. More than an hour had passed since she entered the room. She didn't know if Qiu Chengyuan had gone back to bed. But when she approached the living room was lit with a faint, warm yellow light. Qiu Chengyuan was also sitting on the leather armchair by the window in a robe almost identical to hers. A glass of red wine was placed on the glass table in front of him. He was still the same as before. He didn't seem to like looking at his phone when he had nothing to do. Instead, he frowned slightly and stared out the window in a daze. Perhaps he heard the movement. He slowly turned his gaze to Qi Mo. The robe was really not very suitable. It looked like a wizard's robe on her, dragging all the way to her ankles, making her look like a child wearing adult clothes. Qiu Chengyuan stared at her and couldn't help but smile. I thought you were asleep. Qi Mo didn't answer, but walked straight to Qiu Chengyuan. There was another chair opposite him, and he motioned for her to sit down with his eyes. But Qi Mo didn't sit down. Her eyes were fixed on a glass of red wine on the table. Qiu Chengyuan got up and asked, Want some? He turned around and walked to the bar, took out an empty glass, and poured a glass of red wine for Qi Mo. But when he turned around, he saw Qi Mo drink the glass that was originally placed on the black coffee table in one gulp. Then she walked up to him with fiery eyes. Qiu Chengyuan didn't move, holding the newly poured red wine and standing by the bar, looking at her unusual appearance in confusion. Mo seemed to have made up her mind and raised her neck to ask, "Did you lie to me about going to Switzerland?" Qiu Chengyuan didn't admit it, nor did he deny it. He just shook the liquid in the glass, his eyes slightly lowered. In a way, it was just a white lie. White lie? Then I take it that you didn't want to deliberately deceive me or cause me any trouble. You can say that. Okay, then I'll ask you a second question. Can you tell me the reason for this lie now? Qiu Chengyuan raised his eyes showing a bit of complexity. The air was silent for a few seconds before his voice slowly sounded. I'm afraid it's not very convenient. It may involve some complicated things. Is it related to your work? Partly related. Qiu Chengyuan's eyes showed sincerity. Mo didn't dwell on this part. She took a step closer, her eyes flashing with an unprecedented luster, like a slowly rising crescent moon. One last question. Don't lie to me. Qiu Chengyuan straightened his back, and Mo's eyes were fixed on him. Is there another woman in your white lie? Qiu Chengyuan was stunned for a moment, then smiled and asked, "What do you want to ask?" The alcohol was kicking in, and Mo felt her heart beating faster. She took a deep breath and asked, "Have you been in contact with other women in the past 6 months? Or did you deliberately distance yourself from me because of the existence of other women?" The smile in Qiu Chengyuan's eyes grew stronger. He looked at her 1 second, 2 seconds, as if putting Mo's heart in a frying pan and frying it back and forth. Then she heard his clear and deep voice, "No." In that moment, Mo felt a big rock fall from her heart, which gave her more courage for what she was about to say. Her gaze gradually fell on the wine glass in Qiu Chengyuan's hand. She reached out and took it, raised her neck, and drank it again. The force didn't even give Qiu Chengyuan time to stop her. She put the empty wine glass on the bar and stared at him with fiery eyes. Qiu Chengyuan's body leaned completely against the edge of the bar, his eyes fixed on hers, and he shook his head. "You really have no defense against me. Are you planning to get yourself drunk?" Mo's throat was burning, and her heart was burning even more. She felt like she was being burned by a big fire. She needed to release her long-suppressed emotions, and the man in front of her was her best outlet. She pointed her index finger at Qiu Chengyuan's chest, her cheeks flushed, and said to him with her head down, "Listen to me. Listen carefully. What I'm about to say may be a bit impulsive, but I'm not drunk now. I'm very sober." Qiu Chengyuan lowered his eyes and looked at her restless fingers and said helplessly, "Yes, that's what drunk people usually say. I'm not drunk." Mo suddenly raised her eyes and glared at him with a frown, as if to emphasize that she was extremely sober at this moment. Qiu Chengyuan raised an eyebrow and comforted her. "Okay, you're not drunk. What do you want to say? I'm listening." Mo quickly lowered her head again, as if to hide her face completely. After doing all this, she retracted her hand, clenched her fists tightly at her side, and said, her body trembling with excitement, "After you left, I tried to find you. Your phone was out of service, and I couldn't find you. I went to that escape room again. I played the same theme 6 times. I was caught by the zombie 3 times, and I was stuck at the last level 3 times. I clearly calculated the password, but why didn't it match the clearance pattern? I later found out that the clearance pattern changes every time. You didn't tell me the rules. Why did you leave without telling me the rules? Do you know how long I researched like an idiot?" Qiu Chengyuan was completely stunned. After being stunned, he laughed out loud and rubbed her messy hair. "That's it? Is that what you want to say to me?" Mo shook off his hand and smoothed her straw-like hair again. "That's not important. In the end, I got familiar with the zombie, and he helped me clear the level every time I went. Qiu Chengyuan just wanted to say that you're drunk." But he heard Mo continue. "You left so quietly. Did you ever think about how annoyed I was? I was annoyed that I was always hesitant when I was with you and didn't dare to give more. I was annoyed that when you told me you were going to Switzerland, I was timid and cowardly and didn't dare to ask you if we still had a chance." As the words poured out, Mo's body became hotter and hotter. She grabbed Qiu Chengyuan's sleeve, as if grabbing a life-saving straw, and clenched it tightly. When she raised her eyes were full of tears, and she said in a trembling voice, "I was annoyed that I didn't tell you how much I liked you when you left." Chapter 6. For a moment, Qiu Chengyuan's pupils trembled slightly, the unfathomable light within them fixed on Qimo, as if he wasn't quite sure what he had heard, or as if he was slowly digesting this sudden confession. He didn't move, still leaning against the edge of the bar. Qimo's eyes were filled with hope. She longed to see Qiu Chengyuan's response, longing for him to have the same persistence as her. However, she didn't get the expected feedback. Qiu Chengyuan's expression became more and more serious, his gaze never leaving her face, as if he was examining a priceless archaeological artifact, a seriousness Qimo had never seen before. He slowly opened his mouth and said to her, "I'm sorry, I never thought you would." He seemed to be at a loss for words. Perhaps it was the alcohol slowly evaporating in her body. Qimo suddenly mustered her courage and asked, "Never thought I would what?" "Never thought I would miss you so much." Qiu Chengyuan lowered his gaze and sighed softly. "I'm not a man worthy of your trust." Qimo didn't let go of his sleeve. Her voice became completely choked up. "Will you betray me? Will you have an unforgettable ex-girlfriend? Will your family suddenly force you to marry someone you have to obey?" Qiu Chengyuan heard her trembling voice and frowned in pain. "No." "Then why do you think you're not worthy of my trust?" she pressed. Qiu Chengyuan raised his eyelashes slightly and stared at her, as if trying to see into her heart. His voice was very soft, with unprecedented tenderness. "We may not go very far. So what? Maybe shorter than you think. Better than never having it at all. I will face many involuntary decisions. I don't care. You're drunk. I'm not. No, no." Qimo raised her neck with tears in her eyes, and the crystal liquid slid down her cheeks. Her voice was so soft, she said helplessly, "I only want you, only you." Her crying was heartbreaking, and Qiu Chengyuan couldn't bear to see her tears anymore. He pulled her into his arms, his voice repeatedly saying in her fluffy hair, "Aren't you silly? Aren't you silly?" She raised her hand and hugged his back tightly, crying out in grievance. Qiu Chengyuan hugged her tighter, his voice full of uncontrollable trembling. "I can't be with you often." Qimo cried and replied, "Don't think you're the only one who's busy. I'm also very busy at work. Our bank is small, but we often have to work overtime. I want you to be with me all the time. I may not be able to be by your side immediately when you need me. Don't think I'm that fragile. I've never had a boyfriend before I met you, and I've still lived well for more than 20 years. Qiu Chengyuan's gaze became more intense. He squeezed her robe, making it wrinkled, and said breathlessly, "We may not go to the end. I mean, maybe something unpredictable will happen." Qimo buried her face in his chest, her emotions rising and falling violently. Who can fall in love once and go to the end? Who can predict the future? He pulled her away, lowered his head, and cupped her face, staring at her seriously. "Would you blame me if that happened? Blame me for wasting your best years?" Her eyes seemed to be filled with surging sea water, constantly pouring into Qiu Chengyuan's heart, attacking his fortress, her eyes firm. "Time is precious. Why consider the future when we can do it now?" Her tears, her words, her unreserved boldness, her soft body leaning in his arms successfully destroyed all of Qiu Chengyuan's reason. In his short and restrained life, for the first time, he ignored the consequences and impulsively cupped the girl's face in front of him, kissing her deeply. Qimo felt that her heart no longer belonged to her. That familiar breath drilled into her skin like a pervasive little bug, spreading to her whole body, making her unable to stand, softening in Qiu Chengyuan's arms. He pressed her against the bar with his backhand, and the fragmented kisses went from her lips to her eyes, as if he wanted to kiss everything he could possess. The temperature between the two of them kept rising, their breaths intertwined, sometimes light and sometimes heavy. The robe slipped from Qimo's shoulders, and Qiu Chengyuan could no longer control his breathing, picking her up horizontally. He gently placed her on the big bed and pulled open the wide robe. Qiu shrank into a ball, nervously. He hovered above her, his eyes drunk and affectionate. Afraid? It's still too late to regret it now. These two words seemed to suddenly stimulate Qiu. She let go of her hands, trying to relax her body. Although she was extremely nervous and her whole body was trembling slightly, she pretended to be calm. Her whole face was flushed, making Qiu Chengyuan's breathing heavier and heavier. Qiu's eyes followed him all the time. He was thinner than Qiu imagined, with little flesh on his body, but his bones were beautiful. His skin was a rare cold white among men, but she didn't dare to look down. Qiu Chengyuan hugged her tightly. He kissed her for a long time, not knowing whether it was to eliminate her nervousness or hesitating about something. Finally, he pressed against her and whispered in her ear, "Really not drunk?" She closed her eyes and shook her head. "Are you sure it's okay?" Qiu bit her lip and nodded again, and then pain spread from her body. Perhaps the alcohol really took effect later. She was very confused throughout the process, and her brain couldn't make decisions. She could only hear Qiu Chengyuan asking her gently and carefully, "Does it hurt?" She didn't know how long this lasted, but there was no pain that was rumored to be the first time. Her eyes were only filled with Qiu Chengyuan's blurred and affectionate eyes, like gorgeous fireworks blooming in her body. It was a chaotic night. She only vaguely remembered that when Qiu Chengyuan's breathing became more and more rapid, he suddenly left her and went into the bathroom. She lay on the bed in a daze, thinking that his place really didn't have condoms. At least it could prove that he really didn't have the habit of bringing women back. She even wondered if she was the first woman he had brought back. When Qiu Chengyuan came out of the bathroom and pulled her into his arms, Qiu was already asleep. She woke up again by the alarm clock on her phone outside the room. Qiu reluctantly opened her eyes and saw Qiu Chengyuan wearing a gray-black casual outfit, full of energy. He shook her phone in his hand, his eyes revealing a tenderness that made people intoxicated, reminding her, "You should get up and go to work, right?" Qiu's hangover brain suddenly crashed. She suddenly pulled the quilt over her head, too embarrassed to see anyone. Qiu Chengyuan laughed, sat on the edge of the bed, and touched her through the quilt. "I've confirmed it several times. You said you weren't drunk. Don't tell me you don't remember anything." A grumbling sound came from the quilt. "I remember, it's just... Give me a moment." Qiu really needed a moment. After all, before last night, Qiu Chengyuan was still a dream man who had been out of contact for a long time. But now, the dream man had a substantial relationship with her. Just thinking about this, Qiu's emotions were unusually excited and unreal. So when she changed her clothes, took care of herself, and walked out of the room, she was a little embarrassed to look at Qiu Chengyuan, especially when he kept staring at her and smiling, which made Qiu blush throughout the breakfast. Qiu Chengyuan took her to work. When they arrived at the bank, Qiu didn't get out of the car. It was the first time she realized that the reluctance between lovers could be accurate to the second. Qiu Chengyuan suddenly grabbed her hand, pulled her over, lowered his head and entwined her lips and tongue, then touched her face, her hand, and finally said in her ear, "Come find you for lunch." The first week they confirmed their relationship was like this, to the point of being inseparable. Qiu Chengyuan often came to find her for lunch. Although they only had 2 hours to be together, they still rushed to each other tirelessly. He would still give her flowers, but they changed from lilies to roses, fiery red roses. Qiu didn't want her parents to ask, so she put them in the office. Every time her colleagues asked if she was in love, she just smiled shyly. She wanted to tell the world that yes, she was in love with the man she had admired for a long time. He was the best man she had ever met in her life, impeccable. But reason told her it was too fast. They confirmed their relationship too quickly, and there was no need to rush. She still had many things she didn't know about him, and they had a long way to go. Qiu still had to go home every night. Although she wanted to be with Qiu Chengyuan, she couldn't explain it to her family until they were more stable. So they didn't have much time to date. Qiu could only go to Qiu Chengyuan's place when she had time off. Qiu Chengyuan gave Qimo a Renaissance membership card, so she could go there anytime. Qimo took the Angora rabbit to Qiu Chengyuan's place to be raised. She took the rabbit to a pet shop to have it groomed into a round shape. From the large terrace of the penthouse, she could see a unique sea view. When Qiu Chengyuan wasn't working, he liked to sit there and look out at the calm sea horizon. Gradually, Qimo also liked to snuggle in his arms and look in the same direction as him, with the Angora rabbit in her arms. At that time, the world was colorful in her eyes. She was a person who didn't have much expectation for the future, but since being with Qiu Chengyuan, she would always fantasize about what the future would be like. Of course, without exception, her fantasy future had him in it. She even thought about their future children and told Qiu Chengyuan that she would have two. One would be too lonely. It would be best if they could have an older brother first and then a younger sister. Qiu Chengyuan just smiled and listened quietly. When Qimo asked him if he liked boys or girls, he hugged her tightly and said, "I like any child you give birth to." Occasionally on weekends, Qiu Chengyuan would take Qimo to Weihai or Rizhao for 2 days. He would take her to live in a villa by the sea, charter a fishing boat to take her out to sea just so she could eat fresh seafood. But in fact, Qiu Chengyuan rarely ate seafood. Qimo only found out after being with him that he didn't touch many things. But sometimes, under her repeated persuasion, he would condescend to try a few bites. Later, they actually tried surfing and also went paragliding and diving. They played almost all the water activities. It was the craziest summer Qimo had ever had. She got quite tanned, and she always muttered that she was going to become a big black rabbit. But Qiu Chengyuan didn't care. That time, when they flew from the sea to the sky, Qiu Chengyuan held her hand tightly and said to her, "Living in the sea is actually quite good." Qimo asked him in confusion, "Why? You don't have to stay in one place forever." Qiu Chengyuan's voice was blown away by the sea breeze. But Qimo felt that it was a grammatically incorrect sentence, because you could also not stay in one place while living on land. But the sea breeze messed up her thoughts, and she didn't continue to think about it. Chapter 7. Because they couldn't be together often, Qimo could tell that Qiu Chengyuan cherished her when they were intimate. Every time, Qiu Chengyuan prepared condoms in advance and treated her very carefully. Even every kiss during the process was full of devotion. Qimo couldn't describe the feeling. It seemed that to Qiu Chengyuan, she was like fragile porcelain. Even when their passion was intense, he wouldn't ruthlessly ravage her. It was as if he always held back, unwilling to take away more of her beauty. Even so, Qimo was happy with him. From childhood to adulthood, no man had ever been able to completely care about her feelings, whether it was her eating habits and tastes, her hobbies, or even her experience in bed. She thought she was lucky. She didn't have a particularly outstanding appearance, nor did she have a charming and graceful figure. She wouldn't be noticed at all if she were among ordinary people. But it was this ordinary her who had a love that she considered extraordinary. About a month after they started dating, Qiu Chengyuan offered to transfer the ownership of the Mercedes to Qimo. He said he didn't need it and that it could be Qimo's transportation in the future. Otherwise, he would always have to remember the insurance renewal time. When Qimo asked him why he bought it if he didn't need it, Qiu Chengyuan just smiled at her. Later, he told her something. Qimo had even forgotten that time when Qiu Chengyuan drove her out for dinner in a borrowed Lexus. She had complained about how difficult it was to get a taxi after it got cold. It was just a trivial episode after dinner. But Qiu Chengyuan bought a car specifically because of this sentence, and then found various excuses to take her on the road to familiarize her with the car, and even used a reason to leave the valuable car with her. About 2 months after they were together, it was Qiu Chengyuan's 32nd birthday. Qimo hand-sewed an Angora rabbit, with the letter Y embroidered on the rabbit's left ear and the letter M embroidered on the right ear. She also used all her savings to buy Qiu Chengyuan an expensive watch, the same brand as the one he gave her. Although it wasn't as expensive as the one he gave her, they had matching couple watches from then on. During the early days of her relationship with Qiu Chengyuan, Qimo once thought she had fallen into a fairy tale. Many times after waking up, the feeling of being surrounded by happiness made her feel unreal. Qiu Chengyuan didn't mention going to Switzerland again, and Qiu didn't chase him to ask what the white lie was. Perhaps from the day she started dating Qiu Chengyuan, Qiu had a premonition in her heart that the midnight bell would ring one day, and her fairy tale dream would shatter at that time. But she didn't care. She cherished the time she spent with him and didn't want to leave any regrets or remorse. But as Qiu Chengyuan said at the beginning, the time they spent together was shorter than she imagined. Qiu Chengyuan proposed the breakup. It was about 5.5 months into their relationship. Qiu wasn't particularly surprised, because in the month or so before that, Qiu Chengyuan had been seeing her less and less. He started going to other places frequently, and occasionally didn't answer her phone calls or was absent-minded when he was with her. They even had arguments because of this. In the end, Qiu Chengyuan's reason was that they weren't suitable. 4 short words negated all their past. That time, Qiu couldn't put down her pride and dignity like she did when she confessed. She believed that she had made the greatest effort in this relationship, trying to understand his preferences, his life, his routine, everything about him. But in the end, she was still rejected by him. He was always wrapped in a layer of mist, making Qiu unable to see him clearly and unable to step into his world. It's often said that in one's life, one always meets a few jerks. Was Qiu Chengyuan a jerk? He dumped her after dating for a few months. From a behavioral point of view, he was indeed a jerk. But Qiu couldn't agree with this conclusion in her heart. After all, when they were together, he cherished her, took care of her carefully, and pampered her in the palm of his hand. Even after they broke up, he gave her a car, and there was a constant stream of gifts, big and small, when they were together. Those things added up were not cheap. She had also tried to return them to him, but Qiu Chengyuan told her to throw away the things she didn't want and refused to take them back. He didn't cheat her out of money, and Qiu was willing to give her feelings. There was no third party or betrayal between them, so it was difficult for her to say anything bad about Qiu Chengyuan. In the final analysis, it was not enough love. Because it was not enough love, he couldn't give her any promises. Because it was not enough love, he never took her to see his friends. Because it was not enough love, he didn't mention their future. Because it was not enough love, he broke up so easily. In the first few months, Qiu always naively thought that Qiu Chengyuan would come back to find her. After all, they were so happy together. But as time went by, she slowly recognized reality. In that relationship, perhaps she was the only one who was serious from beginning to end, and Qiu Chengyuan had made it clear to her from the beginning. The relationship between adults was just to try to see if they were suitable for each other. In the end, he felt they were not suitable, that's all. But strictly speaking, this was Qiu's first love, so it was more unforgettable for her. No one knew about her relationship with Qiu Chengyuan. From beginning to end, it became a secret that was forever buried in Qiu's heart. And this relationship had a great impact on Qiu, causing her to be unable to get out of it for the next 3 or 4 years, as if Qiu Chengyuan's shadow was everywhere. His name became her inner demon, accompanying her joys and sorrows in many seasons. It wasn't until Qiu was 29 years old that she met her current husband, a clerk in her father's work unit. He often delivered documents to her father, so he sometimes stayed at Qiu's house for dinner. The man was honest and loyal, for years older than Qiu. Under the deliberate matchmaking of her family, Qiu agreed to try dating him. 6 months later, they got married. That year, Qiu was exactly 30 years old. The wedding was warm and romantic with many guests, but it was not the sea blue scene she had imagined at the age of 24. After marriage, Qiu was loyal to her family and her husband. She rarely thought about the past. She had no secrets from her husband. When she mentioned her short relationship with Qiu Chengyuan, she said with a relieved tone, "We were together for a very short time. It's been too long. I don't remember much." Soon after their marriage, they had their own children, a boy, and in the year Qiu was 33, they had a girl. She finally had 2 children in her life. All the blueprints were the way she imagined them at the age of 24, but the person in the blueprint had long since disappeared from her life. Chapter 8. After the birth of her second child, Qi Mo's life became even busier. She no longer had the time to recall those old stories. Her busy work and lively little family filled her entire life. She thought that the impulse of her youth would eventually be completely submerged by time. Until 2 years after her daughter was born, she met someone by chance. At that time, she had been transferred from the branch to the business department. Her performance at work was neither outstanding nor mediocre, just like her personality, down to earth and steadily rising. That day, a VIP customer came, and after the colleague who received her finished the relevant procedures, she took the form and asked Qiu Mo to stamp it. Qiu Mo glanced at the customer's name, Qiu Chengyuan. For some reason, the man who had long been forgotten in a corner jumped into her mind again without warning. Although there was only one character difference in their names, Qiu Mo didn't know why she suddenly wanted to see this customer. Later, when she recalled the scene that day, she couldn't explain the reason. It was as if an invisible thread was pulling her nerves, making her walk into the VIP reception room as if possessed. She saw the woman, and with just one glance, she confirmed the other person's identity. It was strange to say, Qiu Chengyuan's sister had only met her once, outside the banquet hall many years ago, just a hurried glance in the car, but she seemed to recognize Qiu Mo at first sight. Even the expression on her face was more surprised than Qiu Mo's. Later, throughout the entire process, she called Qiu Mo Manager Qi, and Qiu Mo called her Ms. Qiu. They mechanically went through the entire process, tacitly avoiding the past, and ended this brief encounter. But when Qiu Mo returned to her work post, she saw the things at hand, and still picked them up and chased after her. She handed the set of porcelain to Qiu Chengyuan and told her that it was a gift from the bank to customers before the Spring Festival, and asked her to take it. She really wanted to ask how Qiu Chengyuan was doing now. Had he gotten married? Did he have children? But in the end, she didn't ask. Finally, she said to her, "Take care, Sister Qiu." Perhaps it was the sentence, Sister Qiu, that made Qiu Chengyuan hesitate for a few seconds, and she asked her back, "Don't you want to know how Qingyuan is doing now?" Qiu Mo didn't speak. She thought that the memory had passed a long time ago with the turning of the page of life, long enough not to stir up any ripples in her heart. But when his name was suddenly spoken from his relatives' mouths in this way, Qiu Mo still felt some unease. She followed Qiu Chengyuan's words and asked, "Is he doing well?" The middle-aged woman in front of her, who was still dressed neatly and delicately, didn't answer her question directly. She just looked at her for a while and suddenly asked, "Do you still have a Renaissance membership card?" This sentence evoked some of Qiu Mo's memories. When she was with Qiu Chengyuan, he gave Qiu Mo a Renaissance membership card. After they broke up, she tried to return all the things to him, including this membership card, but Qiu Chengyuan said that he was no longer in Qingdao and asked her to throw it away if she didn't want it. So she never had a chance to return the card. Qiu Chengyuan said to her, "If the membership card is no longer there, then I haven't asked this question. If you still have it, go over and take a look if you have the chance." As if seeing Qiu Mo's concerns, Qiu Chengyuan added, "Don't you want to know how he's doing? Just go and take a look, and you'll know. Don't worry, he's not there anymore." Qiu Mo admitted that Qiu Chengyuan's words were like magic. Since she dropped these words that day, Qiu Mo couldn't help but wonder why Qiu Chengyuan hadn't changed the lock for so many years. What did his sister want her to see when she told her to go there? What unknown secrets were there in that house? This kind of curiosity drove her to recall the past bit by bit for a long time. At that age, when she had just entered society, she experienced the beauty of love for the first time, and many things were obscured by intense and fiery emotions. So many years have passed, and when Qiu Mo calmly recalled that relationship, there were indeed many things that puzzled her. At that time, she was somewhat inferior in the face of this relationship, so she attributed everything to the gap between them. Looking back now, the reason why she missed this relationship for a long time afterward was because there were too many contradictions in Qiu Chengyuan. For example, the way Qiu Chengyuan looked at her when they were together, and his ruthlessness were like two completely opposite emotions appearing in one person at the same time, making her unable to let go for those few years. She didn't throw away the membership card. Whether it was when she redecorated her home or when she moved into her marital home, she had intended to throw it away several times. In the end, she couldn't explain why she didn't discard it. One weekend afternoon, after she coaxed her daughter to sleep, she opened the old item box that she hadn't touched for many years and found the membership card that she hadn't touched for a long time. In the end, curiosity prevailed over her reason. She wanted to go to Renaissance. It seemed that a premonition told her that after this trip, perhaps her and Qiu Chengyuan's past would come to an end in another way. When she stood in front of the door, she once hoped that Qiu Chengyuan was just joking with her and that the membership card could not open the door again. But with a slight click sound, she didn't expect that after so many years, the membership card in her hand could still easily open the house. The moment the door was pushed open by her, her heart couldn't help but beat wildly. This feeling was very unfamiliar to her. However, to her surprise, everything she saw after entering the house was almost the same as when she first came here, as if time had not passed in this space, and it still retained its original appearance for her. The sofas and furniture were covered with white cloths, indicating that no one had lived here for a long time. She walked to the window in the living room and lifted a corner of the sofa. She remembered the night she confessed to Qiu Chengyuan for the first time. He was sitting on this armchair. She seemed to vaguely remember how nervous she was at the time. It seemed that she had never been so excited for anyone since then. She turned around and looked at the bar. The unopened red wine was still on the wine rack behind the bar, but it was already covered with a thick layer of dust. She pulled open the curtains, and the afternoon sun came in, illuminating the slightly floating dust in the air. She felt like she had stepped into a long-sealed world. She walked towards Qiu Chengyuan's bedroom. Every step closer, the sweet moments of the past flooded into her brain like a tide. The moment she stepped into this environment, the past was like an old movie running in front of her, making her unable to stop recalling. The moment she pushed open the door of the room, Qiu suddenly felt a sourness in her nose. She could even smell the unique scent of that man in this room, as if it was engraved in her memory. After so many years, it seemed to be a bit bitter, like a faint smell of Chinese medicine. The bed was also covered with a white cloth. Qiu reached out and touched the big bed. She had given herself completely to that man here. She never thought that she would be able to come back here again one day. She was stunned in the room for a long time. Apart from the basic furniture, there seemed to be no personal items. She didn't know how long this room had been vacant. She looked around with complicated emotions, and finally her eyes stopped on the bedside table, where a dark blue box was placed. Only this item was placed abruptly in the room. She approached the box. There was a layer of dust on it. She blew it gently, and the dust floated in the air. She saw a very small lock buckle, which seemed to be just for decoration and was not locked. She gently lifted it up, and the box lid was opened. The things inside hit her eyes unexpectedly. It was the Angora rabbit that she had sewn by hand. The rabbit's left ear was embroidered with Y, and the right ear was embroidered with M. As time passed, the rabbit lost its original color and turned yellow. Qiu trembled and picked up the plush rabbit. Under the rabbit was a watch, the gift she had given to Qiu Chengyuan with all her savings. When she saw these two things, Qiu's heart couldn't help but beat faster, as if something was right in front of her, but she couldn't touch it. Finally, she saw that there was a letter pressed under the watch, a handwritten letter. She couldn't wait to pick it up and read it with a very uneasy mood. Mo, long time no see. I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but if you can see this letter, a long time must have passed. I don't know how you're doing now. I hope my appearance didn't have too much impact on your life, but I think that one day, when you see this letter, it may mean that I still left some irreparable regrets in your heart. For this, I deeply apologize, but please believe that this is also my biggest regret. I never wanted to deliberately hurt you. So next I want to tell you a little secret about that white lie. I hope you can forgive my decision after reading this letter. When I was a junior in college, I was diagnosed with SCA, a type of hereditary ataxia, due to an accident in a sports competition. So I did a genetic test, and it was determined that this was a hereditary disease. Unfortunately, among my sister and I, death chose me, just as my life was just beginning. I was very unwilling when I first learned about this news. I looked for information everywhere, checked the development history and treatment methods of this disease, but the more I checked, the more desperate I became. When I learned that this disease may be accompanied by various complications in a later stage, I thought of my father. He died of multiple cerebral infarctions when I was a senior in high school. Looking back now, it should also be caused by spinocerebellar ataxia. Perhaps this kind of ending is better. What's even more terrifying is that I don't know what I will face in the future. It may be cerebellar atrophy, physical spasm, cognitive and mental disorders, memory and intellectual decline, and even paralysis. These are all things I can't predict. At that time, I had a girlfriend in college who I had been dating for more than a year. Out of a sense of responsibility, I decided to tell her my situation truthfully. Although I gave her the choice, I was very confident at the time. I thought she would never leave me, even to the end of my life. Unfortunately, she only stayed with me for 3 months and then left me. When I was a senior, I found out that she had gotten together with a brother who I got along with well at the time. This incident was almost a devastating blow to me at the time. For a period of time, I gave up on myself and didn't want to face the rest of my life. My family always stood by my side unconditionally. It was precisely because of their persistence that I decided to fight fate to the end. After I took over my father's business, I raced against time in both my work and my health. But no matter what changes happened in my life later, I never contacted any other women. On the one hand, I didn't want to delay others, and on the other hand, I didn't want to experience the feeling of being abandoned again. So meeting you was an accident, a premeditated accident. Why do I say this? Because the person who was originally supposed to go on a blind date with you that day was not me, but the son of a minister next to me. The reason why I became the person who went to the appointment was because someone in the company was investigating me at that time, trying to find some flaws in me to reduce my power in the company, so as to achieve some deeper goals. This is a bit complicated to explain. You can think of it as a big cake, and I'm the tray of that cake. Someone wants to take away the tray and let the cake fall apart, and then redistribute it. As far as I know, at that time they focused their investigation on my private life, thinking that a person in his 30s like me had never had close contact with any woman, there might be something fishy about it. And they did find some information about my condition, but their understanding of it was not in depth. Therefore, in order to confuse their understanding of my condition and prevent them from spreading some negative information within the company, I needed to have a date, so we had our first meeting. Because of your appearance, those people stopped investigating my illness, which can be said to have bought me nearly half a year to liquidate my power and leave some assets for my family. After I leave, they won't have to struggle for life. Dating you was originally just an expedient measure. I thought I could control the situation and not let things get out of hand. But your serious and careful attitude towards me made me feel guilty, which made me always unable to stop thinking about you. It wasn't a coincidence that I knew what you liked to eat and where you liked to go. Every time I went out, I would carefully consider where I should take you. I wasn't as calm as you saw. In fact, many times when we met, I was also a little nervous, just like you, but I didn't want you to see it. You were the only girl I met during my long battle with the disease. Your appearance made my life start to have some meaning. I don't know when it started, but I began to miss your smile, the way you talked, and your little eyes. The Angora rabbit was a sudden idea. In the darkest year of my junior to senior year, a friend gave me one. The first time I saw that silly rabbit, I was amused by its appearance. It was probably the only thing that I was interested in during those days. Unfortunately, I couldn't take care of myself at that time, and the rabbit didn't live as long as me. You are the second Angora rabbit I have met in so many years, but I don't want to repeat the same mistake. I firmly believe that you will be better off without me. Do you remember what I said to you in the escape room? I won't let you die with me. This was not a joke, but my truest thought at the time. So I lied to you. I know you were very sad, and I was no better. That night, After you entered the building, I couldn't help but come back and stood downstairs at your house for a few hours. During those few hours, I repeatedly picked up my phone and wanted to confess to you, but I admit that I was afraid that you would be painful and entangled for me, and I was even more afraid that history would repeat itself, and after careful consideration, you would choose to leave me. If that were the case, I would rather we keep some good memories. During the 6 months we didn't contact each other, I sometimes went to the place where you worked to see you, but I sat in a car you had never seen, so you wouldn't notice me. I didn't expect to meet you at the banquet. From the moment I saw you, I couldn't see anyone else in my eyes. I even wondered if you had lost weight. Was it because of me? What I didn't expect even more was that you not only chased after me, but also went home with me and confessed to me. What was my reaction at that time? Don't be fooled by my expression. In fact, my heart was very shocked. I don't know how to describe it to you. It's like a person who has been parched in the desert for a long time, and before he faints, a beautiful girl suddenly appears, holding a water bottle to my mouth. It's probably that kind of feeling. You don't know how excited and surprised I was. You not only didn't forget me, but even loved me so deeply. This is probably the best gift God has given me, but I feel ashamed to accept it. I want to tell you that I can't give you a future, and I also want to rationally advise you that there may be no result if you are with me. I don't know when my body will not be able to hold on. I can't control it, and I can't predict it. At the same time, I was afraid that telling you the truth on the spot would scare you away. From the moment I saw you at the banquet, I knew that I couldn't get through this tribulation. Your persistence made me impulsive, and I know that the idea of wanting to possess you is very selfish. But that night, you made me have the impulse that I didn't want to miss you even if tomorrow was the end of the world. You were the biggest accident and the biggest surprise in my life. I treated every minute and every second I was with you as the last day of my life. I told myself 3 months, only allowing myself 3 months of selfishness, because at that time my lower limbs had already started to hurt frequently, and I had to spend a lot of time in the hospital. Many times I sneaked out of the hospital to find you. In order not to let you smell the smell from the hospital, I even sprayed perfume, and you said I was a show-off. Do you remember? But later, when the 3-month deadline came, I was reluctant to leave you. So it was 4 months, 5 months, and when it was almost 6 months, I had to be transferred to Shanghai for hospitalization. Breaking up is probably the best explanation for you. You have your work, your family, your future, and my disturbance to you seems to have to stop here. If you see this letter, it means that my trip to Shanghai is my last trip. Don't feel sad or regretful for me. You came into my life in the last few years of my life, and that's enough for this life. I asked my sister to bury me in the sea after I left, so that I can go anywhere with the ebb and flow of the tide, to visit any old friend, without being trapped in a piece of land waiting for others to take a look at me every year. I spent a long time trying to convince my mom to make this decision. Although she strongly opposed it, I think they will fulfill my last wish. This house, I asked my sister to keep it after I left. If one day you remember me, this will be the last gift I give you. Goodbye, MOMO. Best wishes, Qingyuan. After reading this letter, Qimo was already in tears. Tears dripped between the lines of the writing. Presumably this letter was not written in one go. The thickness of the strokes changed several times. Qimo didn't know how long it took him to leave her this letter. She thought that after too much time had passed, she had forgotten many things. But now she realized that she still remembered some things, down to Qiu Chengyuan's affectionate eyes every time they were intimate. She had never forgotten them. Qiu Chengyuan received 2 years of treatment in Shanghai. 2 years later, his condition gradually deteriorated. He couldn't walk on the ground, and his lower limbs were paralyzed. Finally, he returned to Qingdao. Perhaps if Qimo had opened this door with a Renaissance membership card even once at that time, she would have seen him quietly waiting for her here in his last moments. He never changed the lock, and in his dying moments, he was still looking forward to a miracle. But there are not so many miracles in this world, and he didn't wait for their last meeting. I don't know how long it took. Qimo clenched the letter and walked out of the room, pushed open the glass door, and stepped onto the big platform, where she and Qiu Chengyuan always liked to stay. The sea breeze came on her face. She didn't know why Qiu Chengyuan always liked to stay here and look into the distance, but as time passed over the sea, she gradually understood, because here she could see a whole blue sea. The evening sunset sprinkled on the distant sea level, shining with a faint light, like the eyes of a lover, telling endless words, gentle and lingering. The phone rang, and the ringtone was the lark in the clear air. She didn't answer it, but she knew that she should go home.